morning, everyone. Wasn't the sun brilliant this morning? Fantastic. So we're here in the Zendo at Sonoma Mountain Zen Center, and this is where we do our regular Zazen practice. And when you're sitting, get your posture, lean a little this way and a little that way to get the alignment right. Then you have the sound of the breathing. And a couple of minutes ago, the heater was going. It was like the building was breathing. It sounds kind of like that. You listen to the sound of the breath moving in the throat. And we've been here now for the past 2 weeks. And this is the period called Ango that happens twice a year in February and in August. And it's the name Ango translates as peaceful dwelling, where the Sangha is all living together on this one spot, and it is a fairly rapidly alternating sequence throughout the day of starting at 5 with the sitting, and then the sitting is alternating with the walking meditation, where we take a circle around either half of the room. Although my day starts an hour earlier at 4, where I have 2 main jobs here for the work practice. One is walk the entire perimeter and through all the buildings of the Zen Center with a bell, a fairly loud bell. It's really striking. And that's to wake everyone up, and that kind of sets the tone for the day, the pace for the day. So that's one job, is for the Shuso. That's the head student, which I'm in that role for this Ango. And so keeping everyone on time. Then the second job is cleaning the toilets. And everyone has, their kind of respective jobs that they're assigned. So after the morning sitting, then there's the meal is it's a ritual where it's also done in silence, like the sitting. And you have 3 bowls that stack inside of each other, all wrapped in a cloth. And that's called oryoki, that meal, and it's also the name for the bowls. And those, throughout the day, then you're alternating between moving and sitting, quiet and talking, and indoors, outdoors, meetings, then more sitting, then the meal. And it's a rapidly changing sequence of different contexts and different ways of being and moving and interacting. And that structure is part of how the Soto Zen practice is done, how it's set up. And that in that peaceful dwelling period, then it's designed to help in your practice when you sit Zazen, which is really the kind of the core of the practice. 802 years ago, this month, was when Dogen, the founder of the Soto Zen lineage, arrived in China from Japan. And he, at quite a young age, the reason that he went to China was he had asked in the temple where he was living, he had asked the abbot a question that for which the abbot didn't have an answer. So he said, well, go to China and look around. You'll figure something out. And so 802 years ago this month, Dogen's there on the boat. It just arrived in China on the coast of south central China. And he's sitting there on the boat and waiting. And in those days, you had to apply to go into the monastery. Nowadays, it's much more accessible, but in those days, he had to wait. And sometimes, like you'll see it in the movies sometimes, where student goes to the monastery, knocks on the front door, and I said, I want to be accepted for study and practice. And then the monk says, okay, wait a little bit. The door shuts, and then sometimes 1, 2, 3 days later, then they'll open it again and say, okay, you can come in. So Dogen's on this boat, having just arrived, and an old monk gets on the boat to buy some dried shiitake mushrooms for his temple. And Dogen, he asks him, well, why are you wasting your time cooking? Shouldn't you just go and do the Dharma? Read the text, write, study, practice. And that really caught him by surprise, the answer. And the story kind of relates to a question that I had for myself when I arrived here for the beginning of Ango, which is, what am I agreeing to? And so he asked the monk, why don't you just do your Dharma? And the monk says two things. One, well, you must not be from around here, but it's clear you don't know the first thing about Zazen. And so that kind of approach to what the old monk was doing, the work, study, sit, walk, that's kind of how we do it here during the Ango and throughout the year. And so that was Dogen's introduction to China. And he probably thought, he's waiting there and like, okay, I really want to make a good impression. And it started a little differently. And that interaction must have influenced him a lot, because the Zazen that Dogen brought back to Japan was not what is often seen is it's not a linear path to enlightenment. Instead it's just sitting, and the moments of awakening can happen right there in the practice itself. And over time, the discipline of sitting number of times per day here during the Ango, we're going 6 sittings per day, lasting about 40 minutes each, followed by the walking. And then starting tomorrow, that's that 1 week period called the sesshin. That's the silent meditation. So that will be then that it increases to about 8 sittings per day. And the daily structure that we have here now was it's pretty much the same structure as it was back in Dogen's day, with the interaction, the activity, the work, the rest, and the sitting. So we're now here on day 15, and once each Saturday, and then sometimes during the week, then the person who's here in my role, so this time it's me, and there are people that have been the Shuso or head student before that are in the room here, and there are people that will be the next one. And so giving the talks is another part of the role. And the teacher of Kwang Roshi, Suzuki Roshi, in one of his books called Branching Streams Flowing in the Dark, he writes a little paragraph about preparing for the talks. And he says that, well, my teacher would always encourage me to really study a lot before the talk. It won't help, but you still have to study. So for my particular theme for this Ango, each time Ango happens, the Shuso picks the theme for that month. And so in my theme, I chose the concept that's written about by Dogen, which is that insight can happen in the most ordinary of moments. And it's a process that, you're not practicing now and then hoping someday something will happen. You're practicing, and then you're observing, and you're breathing. And it's in those ordinary moments, both inside the Zendo and outside, where moments of awakening can happen. And the book that we're reading, it's there are several different translations of Dogen's book. So this one is called the Shobo Genzo, and it is the transcribed talks of his time at his temple that he set up in Japan. And there are a number of different translations, and they're all good translations. But they're phrased differently, rendered into English differently. And this particular copy is not the one that I started with. It's the one that I started with was written in a more kind of modern colloquial English style, and this one is it's a direct translation. And there were some details that don't make it into the more modern versions. And, everyone reading the text will have different ways to interact with it. And there was two details about this version that I'll describe. And when you become a Zen student and you take the vows, that's called Jukai, then you're given a name, a Dharma name. So my regular name is Michael McCulloch, and then my Zen name is Zenmen. And that term, Zenmen, is defined as, you've heard of this present moment, and Zenmen is the moment just before that moment, where whatever intentions or views or questions that you have are topical. And it's at that moment, just before that, in the Soto Zen tradition, that the idea is to focus the mind on that moment just as it is. And rather than trying to make distinctions between things that you're seeing, this is good and that's bad, you're just observing. And you're trying not to make contradictions between the subject and the object of the context. It's not, you and me or us and them, or these days us versus them. It's you're trying to let go of the things that distance us from each other, and that is that's kind of the core of the Zen practice, in the sitting and the working. So this translation, as I said, it's I'll describe why I picked this one when I saw it, and that is it's there is the chapter that we focused on, called the Genzo Koan. That is Dogen's writing about these moments of realization, and he, in contrast to some of the previous translations, which described it as unknowable and hidden, to me that felt like, well, for an ordinary person like me, that sets a high bar. And the way that this person, Nishijima, the way he translated those two phrases is, he said that the moment to be known is inconspicuous, meaning it's there, and it's not maybe where you think it might be, but just look around. And then the other comment that he wrote right at the end, it's the last phrase of this chapter, where Nishijima translates it as the awakening of the Dharma moment is ambiguity itself. And those two worked for me. And it changed the whole way in which I was able to relate to the Dharma liturgy, which previously, I'd start at the front and then go through to the end and hope some of it would stick. But these two words in this particular translation, it was kind of like taking the book and kind of shooting an arrow through it, so that your question kind of can take you into the material and spend more time in a smaller amount of material. And so in these first 2 weeks of the Ango, we've focused all of our attention on that one chapter, which is about 4 pages long. And there's a little description in the chapter of this concept called dropping away of body and mind. And in the Zazen sitting, you're trying to focus on that as something to do. It's a and then, but there are also other moments will happen when you're not expecting them. And in looking at the characters, the translation, there's both an active and a passive sense of that. And that was a game changer for me, because the idea of allowing something to happen, inviting it, setting up the structure where that can happen, that's something that I guess I thought of it as, oh, now I can approach it with an aspiration rather than with an ambition. And when that happens, when those moments happen spontaneously, that is, those are like real gems. And then in the teaching of the Soto Zen, Zazen, you try to bring that into the active part of the practice, which is the interaction with the Sangha and the work practice, and then take it further from there. And over the years of my involvement with Zen practice, I think I started as more of like a Zen tourist, where I'd come up now and then go away, and there wasn't a lot of connection between the two. And then more recently, just before the pandemic, I was talking to Roshi, and he was kind of interested in that sort of disjointed pathway, and he said, "Well, how much time do you think you have?" And so that was good. That was a real arm twister, just the right way. And so that's when I decided to take the vows. And the Chinese characters for that process, it's two. It's the first character is to return. So I was literally, in a relative sense, returning. And then the broader, more absolute sense, it's returning to where you already are. And then the practice is trying to illuminate that. So returning to where you are, but also returning to where the people with the robes hang out. And this, then there was the pandemic, but even during the pandemic, there was still everyday Zazen. And so that kind of helped get me ready, in a sense, for this practice period here, where we are today. And I'd like to just briefly describe what my personal experience has been with the material, with the practice, in hopes that it might be helpful. The first of these moments was we had just finished the sitting Zazen practice here, and then usually you go out and down to the Sangha house for breakfast. It was just after the early morning sitting, and this was early last week when the clouds and the fog and the rain was really heavy, right on the mountaintop. And I'm walking down the hill toward the Sangha house, and just kind of glance up, the way that one normally would. And right at the top of the mountain, there's this small little valley just below the peak, little kind of a cup shape like the hand, and it was full of clouds right there. And my curiosity kicked in, and I thought, well, that's interesting. Wonder what it's like up there. And I'm down here. And then all of a sudden, it was as if that spot up there and someplace back here in the mind, and all kind of lit up, and all the dots got connected. And then it was time for breakfast, and the moment was over. And then over the following days, those kinds of moments started happening more frequently. And thinking back on them, there are a few things that they all had in common. One is they're very brief. Two is they were simple. And three, it was a kind of wordless, not amazement, because that would be kind of a superlative, but somewhere more in the middle. It was just all observing, and then the observing kind of bounces back and illuminates the inside in a way that is as simple as I'm describing it, but very, very memorable. And that's two others that I'll describe. One is I mentioned the oryoki, and so we have the bowls, and after you eat the 3 bowls worth of food, then some tea is brought, and you rinse the first bowl, and then that water goes into the second bowl, and then you clean that bowl, and then go into the third. And so the first bowl, the Buddha bowl, the big one, is still sitting there. And at that moment, it's still kind of damp on the inside, and you take the towel, the cloth, which is sitting on your left side, and then you just drop it into the bowl, and then you're going to dry the bowl. Normally one would take the bowl and put the towel in and kind of pack it in there and rub it briskly to get it to dry it. But as the fingers touched the fabric of the cloth, it was like there was a kind of a universe of space inside and underneath the cloth that you could tell it was there. You can't feel it because it's on the other side of the cloth, but a kind of a tingly feeling in the hand. It was weird. And then rinse the bowl. It's a circular bowl, and it's still the bowl, but to have your awareness inside of the bowl was striking. And then the third one, this one is funny. So last week I called my wife Michelle and let her know how it's going. And she said, "Oh yeah, it's the Zen scholar calling." And I thought, well, I don't know, it's actually pretty straightforward. And later that day, I had another one of these moments where I'm walking up the path, and there's these tight ring of redwood trees, around where the original mother tree was cut down. And you look up there, I looked up there, and it looked like a huge, vast space. And it was mid-morning, the rain had stopped, the clouds were high but still there, so there wasn't really any wind. And in the midst of this giant empty space, then they could see this one drop from up near the top of the circle, just kind of slowly coming down, slower than it seemed like it should have been. And I'm thinking, no, that's actually the amount of knowledge you have about this Dharma space and the practice, and Master Dogen's understanding in the book, and the pantheon, the liturgy is huge, and the amount that one could understand is small, but even that one drop is still meaningful. It's still gonna nourish one little blade of grass on the ground. So that's overall a kind of step-by-step process, and one step at a time, kind of like an ox walking. And if you see old Asian paintings of an ox walking through the field, and there's the herder there, and he's got the stick, and that's kind of the metaphor for Zen practice, one at a time. And just yesterday, I read a brief little section of the text, which kind of describes that arc of time for me over the past few decades. Anxious seeking gives way to restful confidence. So there's the way that we'll approach it is here is not read a lot of text and then do some sitting. It's more do a lot of sitting and then read the text to see if any of that resonates or is reflecting, if what's in the text is reflecting what you're experiencing. I also want to mention the, let's see, well, before I do that, I'm gonna read couple of short passages from Master Dogen Shobo Genzo. And here's the one that I was alluding to earlier. When we find this place of the Buddha Dharma practice, this action is inevitably realized as the universe. The way and this place are neither great nor small. They're neither subjective nor objective. Neither have they existed since the past, or do they appear in the present. And they're just present, just like this, just now. When a human being is practicing and experiencing the Buddha's truth in this state, the place exists and the way is mastered, and therefore, spotlight on this part, the area to be known is not conspicuous. So that was one thing that worked for me. It's rather than being unknowable, it's not conspicuous. The reason it is so is that this knowing and the perfect realization of the Buddha Dharma appear together and are experienced together. So the practice, the silent practice, the words, the reading, all together. At this time, the mysterious existence is not necessarily a manifest realization. Realization is the state of ambiguity itself. And there's something that's related to Buddhist practice, not of it, but definitely influenced by it. And this is a Greek philosopher named Pyrrho. And I think for someone like me, coming from Western culture and then going to an Asian culture to try to understand something about it or about yourself, it makes a sense to read about your own culture as well, to understand that, and particularly from a philosophical standpoint. And so this person, Pyrrho, about 75 years after Buddha died, he traveled from Greece to India. Very dangerous at that time, kind of like Dogen, going across the North China Sea on this little rickety boat. And when he arrived, he said, I really had to put my full trust in the captain because I didn't think we were going to make it. So what Pyrrho, he interacted with the Buddhist, in India, and he said a few things that have helped me, having more recently discovered this Pyrrho's way, that helped me to get closer to Zen. So the first one is, in talking about the Dharma practice, man should know from this rule that he is cut off from the truth, at least for now. And then you go about trying to sort that out. This argument too shows that in truth we know nothing about anything, but every man shares the generally prevailing opinion. Now that we do not really know of what sort each thing is or is not, has often been shown. That's the inconspicuous. It's there, but it's inconspicuous. Really, we know nothing. Truth is buried deep. Medicine heals diseases of the body. Wisdom frees the soul from passions. One person no more exists than the other. So we're all kind of in it together. That was, for me, one of the big revelations of the Ango period is, everyone's here working and living together, eating meals, sitting zazen, having discussion, being quiet, and all that kind of mixing ground is where it happens. Then, having described where we are, what this time here together is, what's happened along the way, another part of Buddhist practice is in Zen is studying the koans, these kind of riddles or rhymes or puzzles. But Dogen's position, which was explained to me by the Roshi, is you can read them if you want, but really it's the practice that actually reveals your own koans and the things to sort out. And so I've written down a few that have occurred to me. And the first one was, being here's a good start, but you have to be willing to take the time. Be on time, but don't hurry. Follow the form exactly, but make it your own. Receive the instruction, but grab it tightly with dedication. What you need is already there, but you still need to practice. Hurry kills insight. Line everything up for 4:30 tomorrow morning, but don't think about it until then. Stay present in this very moment, but anticipate future needs. And then to close, I'll read a brief poem that a friend sent up. This was written during, during the pandemic, she was being treated for cancer. And she wrote this poem called, "Am I Safe Today, 2021? When I go out to the still dark street, sliver of moon in the sky, 6:30 a.m., to pick up my newspaper. I look around to see if nobody got into the garage while I was stooping carefully to scoop it up. Am I safe today? When I returned from a bike ride, having braved all the possible dog attacks, gasoline fumes, cars in the bike lane, and once more lay neuropathied feet on the ground. Or when I lock all the windows, shut the windows, set the alarm, pretend I've shut out all the fears of this uncertain age. Did I earn my safety today by undergoing chemo last year, or was it further back, when I hid in the crawl space between the fences from the boys who were chasing me in my old neighborhood? Was it when I leaped from a speeding car on the bridge to avoid an abduction, or when I climbed a hill alone only to find a mirror at the top where I looked in my reflection at 19 and thought, I will survive this life. Am I safe today from fears of car crashes, pandemics, climate change, accidents, recurrences, dictators? Nope. All I can do is pedal on through this glorious reds and golds of this November fall, pushing through the past, the present, and the unsettling, just around the corner, future of us all.